We as adults fear what's unfamiliar to us. So we value what's familiar and we're afraid of what's unfamiliar.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it's got such a powerful grip on us. And it's frequently called, the fear of the unknown, but it's deeper than that. It's the fear of the unfamiliar.
Mm.
But if you break that down, the root word of familiar is family.
Introducing the Poet Life Podcast. Go check it out today on your favorite platforms, including iTunes, Apple Music, and the website, thepoetlife.com.
Find a way, find a way.
Hey, 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 I am Christoph Jenkins of the Poet Life and the Poet Life Podcast. And today, really excited because I get to reconnect with a friend, a colleague, even a business partner, because we worked on an amazing project. How long ago was that? A year and a half or so?
Yeah, it was about a year and a half ago.
Yeah, a major project though. Working with Lisa Nichols on the spoken word movie. What's the name of that movie again?
Let's grow.
Let's Grow, man. And
Mm.
and we touched on a few things. You know what? Since I already jumped in, first of all, Sean Smith, Coach Sean Smith. All right, let's go there because I said coach, and I'm sure maybe they might be asking, okay, so what is he coach? Is he a basketball coach or is he,
Right.
tell me about yourself, man. What do you coach?
Yeah, there's all kinds of different variations of coach, and I think the word has gotten kind of watered down to some degree. I've been in the life coaching realm for about 17 years, and
7
that has,
years.
yeah, I mean, this is before, internet marketing really took hold. This is before I remember somebody going, "Hey, there's this thing called Facebook, and we think it might be good for business. So you might want to create an account." So, I was in the coaching and speaking world, personal development, way back in the day. And
Mm,
my primary focus has always been on helping people release whatever's holding them back, the limiting beliefs that we have, any kind of conflicts that we have inside, the values, the identities, all that inner work has been so transformational for me. And that's where I've focused a lot. And primarily my clientele over the last 5 years or so have been entrepreneurs, people that,
mm.
want to make a go at this thing at home. And because we know that, this, and I learned this, that when we don't have a job or we don't have external accountability and we need to be the motivation,
Mm-hmm.
we need to have that internal drive because
Mm-hmm.
we don't have any external accountability, which is where pretty much all of us start out when we want to do something with
Yep.
our work, our message. Um, we need to self motivate and we need to self navigate. And that's been the primary focus that I've been really passionate about for years and years and years.
Mm. Life coaching is so interesting to me, and I also believe that a coach should have a coach. You know what I'm saying?
100%.
Like
Yeah.
it's like you're making sure that your client um, has someone to hold them accountable,
Hmm.
uh, and then it's like, okay, all right, if that's the case, then who holds you? Who holds you accountable? Who's your coach?
Yeah. Right over here, right to my left is a flip chart. I just taught this concept the other
Mm,
day. And what I taught is that you need to be a product of the product,
mm,
meaning if you are selling life coaching, you better have been a product of life coaching, but you also need to be a purchaser of the product.
right.
Because if you're not a purchaser of the product, from one angle, you're fraudulent, in my opinion. Like you're selling
Yeah.
something you haven't bought. But energetically, it's really difficult to navigate the sales process when you haven't been a
Exactly.
buyer.
Exactly.
And people can feel that's out of alignment. They can feel
Hmm.
that the integrity is not really there, and you can't advocate as powerfully as you can when you say, listen, this is the work that changed my life, and this is what I want to invite you into. And I think there's
Hmm.
way too many life coaches. I think the business itself has gotten watered down to the point where people are just trying to get successful by making money in the shortest way possible. And in those shortcuts, there's a lot of value that's being detoured around, right? And you
Hmm.
just can't
Hmm.
do it. And people are hurting themselves by not going through the process that's required.
Right. Because I'm also learning as myself as a poetry business coach.
Yep.
And I'm sure a lot of people have not heard that before. Um,
It's
I'm
distinct, man. I
learning.
love it.
Yeah, man. I've learned to stay in my lane,
Mm,
and and I don't want to use dominate, but specialize in my lane,
there you go.
you know, because I'm in it for a reason. I'm driving in this lane for a reason, and I'm learning how to drive better every day. And if you can't teach what you know, you don't really know it.
Bingo.
I teach my daughters that all the time, so
Mm-hmm.
especially my oldest daughter. I have three daughters, 7 and under. And so I teach her, just because you can answer the question, it doesn't necessarily mean that you know the answer. She's
Mm.
like, huh?
Yeah. On the surface, that doesn't make sense, but there's a
Right.
depth. There's a depth that you're speaking to.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. If you can't teach your little sisters what you know, if you can't teach a three and a
yeah,
half or 5-year old, and that's what they say, if you can't explain something to a 5-year old,
right.
you don't really know it.
You don't really know it.
You can't, if you can't simplify it, if you're only speaking 10,000 feet above, you
Mm-hmm.
know, yeah, yeah, because there are lay people that aren't in your industry, or so how do you liaise? How are you the liaison between, when I was working my 9 to 5, I was a business analyst, so I was a liaison. I liaised between the stakeholders, who are the end users,
Yep.
and didn't know the IT terminology and the language, right? So I did. So I was the middleman, and I
Yeah.
was able to translate what the engineers and the IT people were saying, because they're like, "What? Tell me what he's saying. He's speaking another
Right.
language." So I was the
Yeah.
translator. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's so important for you, the coach, also to keep learning.
Yeah, what I love this topic. In my language, in my studies, what you're really speaking about is embodiment. The mastery level learning, right?
Mm,
But we're not conditioned to learn like masters. We're conditioned to learn like students, where somebody gives us information, we regurgitate it on the test, and then we get
mhm,
celebrated or we get judged, with a grade. And so we think that learning is modular. We think that we just do a thing and then we check that box and then we've learned it. But that's such a surface level intellectual knowledge, and knowledge doesn't equal understanding, to
right,
your point. But if you
right.
really truly understand something, then you can talk about it with the technical experts and you can talk about it with the 5-year-old, because
Mhm,
understanding is flexible. Understanding is able to pivot. And
mhm.
in so many endeavors in life, business being one of them, especially in the coaching world, people are just trying to learn the rules, but rules are
Yeah,
not flexible. You got to understand the laws. When you understand the laws of learning, or the laws of connection, or the laws of sales, the laws of marketing, messaging, the laws of parenting, right? What you do with your 7-year-old is going to be different than what you do with your 5-year-old, than your three and a
right.
half year old. My kids are 20 and 16 now. I can't take the rules that once applied and apply them now. right? But that level of applicable flexibility is only available to somebody that really knows the craft and understands the craft.
Hmm.
And most people just don't value that kind of learning. We don't value that kind of study, and we
Yeah.
suffer because of it.
But it is it starts from home.
Mm,
So here in the Jenkins household, school is supplementary.
mm, that's powerful.
It's the other way around
Yeah,
for us, right? School information is extra.
love that.
So my daughters, this is my office slash studio slash humble abode. You know, this is also classroom for them, and
Yeah.
and that's the board, and they call it daddy school.
Oh, that's so cool.
So even with math, they're learning the tricks to math, to learn it faster and more effectively,
Yeah.
um, right? And so to where they won't need a calculator, and there's
Mm,
tricks to learn it, to where you can calculate in your head without using your fingers, and
mm,
but also just life in general.
yeah.
They know about
Just life
credit
lessons. Mm,
at 3, 5, and 7.
that's amazing.
You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
the stuff that we complain that the schools are not teaching, if you flip it, and
Yeah.
our thing as parents, I don't have time, I gotta work, you better figure something out, turn that TV off, and
Right.
because you just can't sit there. All right, for generations, we're gonna get mad at the school system. It's just
Right.
not gonna change.
Right.
School
Yeah, it all
system
comes
is
down to
school
what
system.
we value. What do you value? And then you make time for what you value.
That's what it is, man. And it's so key for my wife and I to make sure that they know what we want them to know, what
Yep.
they need to know, and what we weren't taught when we were kids.
Absolutely.
And money is one of the biggest things.
Mm,
It is super huge, man. Like, and to a point where, um, why is money taboo?
mm,
Why why is it taboo?
right.
If you talked about it more, if you talked about your salary and how you want to increase it, somebody can help you.
Absolutely.
But
Yep.
somewhere you were taught that you don't talk about salary. You don't talk about how much money is not in your account.
And then we become afraid of those things that are taboo because we don't know about how to talk about it. And I think it's doing a huge disservice individually, to your point. If we
Mhm,
never, and I never talked about money, my parents weren't open with
mhm,
it, around it with me. And so I definitely had a negative, and still to some degree had a negative
mhm,
relationship with money.
mhm,
My self-esteem has been wrapped up in money a lot of times, so that if my bank account was high, I'm good as a person, and when it's low, I'm not. So my
right.
personal value, my self-worth,
Mhm,
was a function of how much money I had in my bank account, and that led to all kinds of problems.
yeah.
That has nothing to do with money. It leads to
Mhm,
relationship problems, and just my own personal connection with myself. But then you think
yeah.
about all these other topics that we're taught to stay away from. We're taught to stay away from race, stay away from religion, stay away from
Mm,
politics. And I think what we're seeing right now in society is a function, or a result rather, of what you're saying.
mhm,
Because we were not taught how to talk about disagreements, this is what we have. We have a
mm,
world right now where people are afraid of conflict because we don't know how to keep our dignity intact, or keep the other person's dignity intact, or look for shared experiences. We just immediately attack differences. And I think a huge reason is because we weren't taught how to
Yeah.
talk about tender topics, especially where we disagree. You know, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
what would the world look like if we could actually discuss in decent ways
Yeah.
disagreement? It would
Yeah.
be a fundamentally different society.
Yeah. This happened last night. My 7-year-old, before bed, she was laying there and said, Daddy, my friend, we're Christians, in the Christian faith, and my friend said, Jesus isn't real. I said, okay, cool, you know,
Mhm.
and I said, and that's okay. That's
Yeah.
okay that she said that Jesus isn't real. And she's entitled. Now, when I'm talking to my kids, I forget that I have to then explain certain words,
Right.
so I had to bring it even further down, but that draws out the conversation. Entitled means,
Yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah.
but basically it is okay for her to believe what she believes,
Right.
and it is okay for you to believe what you believe. And so don't feel pressured to have to defend your belief.
Bingo. And then she can keep the relationship intact.
That's
Yeah.
and adults haven't figured that out.
Yeah. I think it comes down to security, or at least a big part of it, because when people are insecure, they don't like being questioned. And I
Mm,
think it actually it comes back around to what we were just talking about, because if they can't explain their beliefs,
mhm.
then they don't want them to be questioned, because then their ignorance might be exposed, right? So now questioning is a threat. And you think about that, how else are we supposed to learn about each other? You know, how can two people with different religious backgrounds learn about the other one without questioning? You know,
Right.
this is what I believe. These are our rituals, and this is what
Mhm.
we do. And what about you? You know, one of my best friends growing up believed in a God with 8 arms. And I
Yeah.
thought it was fascinating. And we were able to have these conversations based on love and connection and respect without threat. But
Yeah.
what
What
I
is it?
think
A
is so,
Rish, what is it? What's their religion?
I don't even remember.
Okay.
I don't know.
I think I
But it
know what you're
was
talking about.
but it
But
was
go ahead.
curiosity rather
Right.
than defense and attack.
Yeah.
And I love what you're doing, because you're giving your daughters the
Mhm.
personal rootedness
Yeah.
of that security,
Yep.
so that other people's differences aren't a threat to who
Yep.
they are.
Yeah.
Because when we feel threatened by other people, you know, the worst is going to come out of us quite often. And what you're speaking to is the root of it. And another piece to this is creativity. You know,
Mhm.
creativity is curiosity. Creativity is creating what doesn't already exist. And there's this energy
Mm.
of creative flow that doesn't exist in the rigidity of the rules, or the me versus you, there's the black white, not necessarily, race black white, but either or dichotomy,
Mhm.
right?
Right. Right.
And I think it's a call for creativity that I know you believe in as well,
Mhm.
that's required to bridge some of these gaps, but also let people just live, And I wanted to say, back when you were introducing, and you mentioned the poetry business, those two words don't usually go together. And just that right there, putting poetry and business,
Mm.
is powerful. So I just want to celebrate you on that,
I
and
appreciate that, man.
highlight the
But
trailblazing that you're doing.
listen, and I appreciate that, because it's so important for the poet to understand, even just the artist in general. It's so important that for them to understand that you're more valuable as a business that offers poetry as a service
Mm,
than simply being a poet.
That's
The reason I say that
profound. Yeah.
now, for the poets that don't want to monetize your craft, that is a decision.
Yeah.
I have to give that disclaimer, because what will happen is, or what happens is, one poet that makes a decision to just do it for the love or do it for the inspiration will look down on or shame the poet that it wants to do it as a career or as a
That's
business.
huge. Mm.
And it's, again, it's okay
Yeah.
that you want to just do it for love
Yeah.
and humanity. And it is okay for poet to perform and write for businesses and companies and get compensated for it.
Mm-hmm.
The difference is the poetry community and the poetry industry.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a huge
So,
distinction.
right? So you can be in the community as a professional poet, but if you're going to choose to monetize your work, you have to step into the industry.
Bingo.
It's time to create an unforgettable experience at your next event with The Poet Life by booking a keynote poet. Poets excite your audience with motivating messages, charismatic delivery, colorful rhythm, powerful prose, and heart-filled stories with a style of spoken word that's tailored specifically to your event. The Poet Life has keynote poets in your city of all ages and backgrounds.
Visit thepoetlife.com to learn more and book your poet today.
And they're so wildly different muscles. The muscles to create are different than the muscles to monetize. It's
Mhm,
just the business strategy, the entrepreneurial strategy
mhm,
is a whole nother skill set.
mhm.
And we can develop it internally, or maybe we get a partnership or something like that. But if you want to build a business, there are skills that you just simply cannot go without them being developed. I
Right.
find that in the coaching world a lot. We don't really identify as being creative. I'm trying to change that narrative, because coaching and helping people change their life is a very creative process.
Mhm.
And the things that make somebody a really good coach are not the same muscles that will allow somebody to succeed. And
Right.
I think it's exactly the same in what you're talking about. So even in those words, right? Poetry
Mhm,
and
mhm,
business,
mhm.
it's like left foot and right foot. You need them both, but they're
Yeah.
different.
Mhm. Yeah. It's, we've heard of software as a service. That's called SaaS,
Yeah.
SaaS. That's big in IT. So over here,
I never
it's,
knew what that stood for. Thank you
yes,
for that education. I've seen it all over the
software
place.
as a service. That's
Got
SaaS.
it. Okay.
Yeah. Right. So just it is what it says. It's a,
Yeah.
people create software to provide a service.
Mm,
So here it's pass
there
poetry
you go.
as a service.
I love that.
You see,
That's
so
powerful.
so so just in the name of it all makes it sound more valuable,
Yes.
because, again, it's a decision that you have to make. Now, if you're going to stay on the side of not being compensated for your poetry, don't complain
Right.
about someone saying, can you come perform, and then you ask, is there a budget? And then they're like,
Mhm.
no, there's a budget, but we're not paying for, poets.
Right.
So, but just stay, or like the kids say, keep that same energy
Yeah.
when they're saying do it for exposure, or just come and do it for free. And right. So
Yep.
you can't complain and get mad at the poet that wants to make a career out of it.
Right. Because that'll ruin your poetry. It'll ruin your own creativity, holding on to that resentment and just that
Yeah.
negative energy.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I think a lot of it is um uh based in tradition, for
Mm,
so long, for too long. That's not what poetry is for.
yeah. What would you say that traditional programming says? What is poetry for? What do you think we've been programmed with?
We've been programmed to believe that, one, there's no money in poetry,
Sure.
which never ever made sense to me,
Yeah.
because poetry is life.
Right.
Like, it literally is the foundation of life. Poetry
Yeah.
is in the Bible.
Mhm.
Psalms is a book of poems.
Right.
You know, like like what art form can say that?
Mm.
Yeah, I'm sure they were dancing, and singing. I'll take that back. In Bible days and things of that nature. But was rap in the Bible? So
Right.
it's like, and poetry is, can be presented in like a million different ways.
Right.
Like, I write haiku on a typewriter.
Mhm.
It's the Japanese short form of poetry.
Yeah.
Then there's limericks, and then there's so many ways to present poetry in motion.
Yeah.
Like a doctor who is amazing with his hands and can save lives is a poet in his
Yeah.
right. It's
Yeah, I
because
totally agree.
you'll hear that comparison. It's like
Mm.
poetry.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's really fascinating that there's so much value, and yet there is this programming specifically
Programming.
around poetry, and I feel like specifically around poems. So what you're speaking to is that poets don't necessarily write poems, and poems aren't necessarily what we think they are. They're not just this container of words that rhyme, in a
Yep.
certain scheme. So the
Yeah.
value of poetry shows up in so many different ways, and it is life. I think creative poetry is the way to stay happy. It's the way to find happiness. It's the
Mm.
way to untie all the knots that our rigid human
Yeah.
programming has tied for us. I think it's the way to bridge gaps. I think it's the way to
Yeah.
heal. It's the way to solve problems. So
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
really interesting that something so wildly valuable in a certain context has been programmed to be uh, almost meaningless. I hate to use that harsh of a word, but when I asked you the question,
Mhm.
I think poetry to some degree has been programmed to be like, oh, that's cute. That's cute. Look at the person making the words rhyme. That's cute,
Yep.
but not something I'm going to pay for, right?
Yep.
Not something that we monetarily value, when in
Mhm. Mhm.
reality, it's the thing we should be paying the most for.
What? Listen, I've posted, I've said this and posted this online to poets, so they understand. I said your poems are more than poems.
Mm,
Then in the caption, I broke down, I mean, bulleted. Your poem is a workshop.
mm,
Your poem is a dissertation. Your poem is a song. Your poem is motivation. Your poem is
Yeah.
a recipe. It it's a
So
TED
true.
talk.
Yep.
So and when I explain that, it opens the mind of a
Yeah.
poet, because I can't remember which episode, but I can't remember the poet's name right now, at least. I forgot. Anyway, um, he and his poet partner lived off one poem for
Hmm.
10 years.
Really? Wow.
For 10 years. And most people are like, okay, so what do you mean? How?
Yeah.
They wrote a poem together. It's a Christian poem. I can't remember about what exactly, but what they did was be intentional.
Yeah.
And when they first released it, it got great attention, like most poets, poems do, right?
Yeah.
Or even like a singer's song does. Um, but what they did after they were performing, different churches, and even reached worldstarhiphop.com,
Nice. Yeah.
um, they became very intentional and said, okay, this poem is about this. Who advocates for
Right.
this? It's not just churches, but there are nonprofits
Hmm.
that speak to this subject matter. So let's do what professionals do and reach out, do a search and get a list of these type of companies, organizations, institutions,
Yep.
and be proactive and say, hey, I
From a
know you
single
all have a
poem, man.
conference. I know you all have an event coming up. I think this poem would be perfect for your event, project, commercial. And I was like, oh, because we're
Yeah.
conditioned to we're conditioned to wait
Yep.
on someone to call us.
So true.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Nobody's calling. I'm waiting. I put it on Instagram. And I
Yeah.
got it in my bio.
Those are some of the entrepreneurial skills that most people don't have. It's about I mean, you got to reach out, and especially nowadays, the good thing about social media is that we can literally create our own channels. We can create
Create
our own
your own
platforms,
opportunities.
literally create our own opportunities. The flip side of that is there's a lot of people doing that. And so there's more competition now than there
Mhm.
was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And unless we have those entrepreneurial muscles, then and so I make a distinction between the entrepreneurial game and the employee game. And it's not just whether you have a job or not. Employee
Mhm.
is a mindset. And the employee mindset is kind of what you alluded to. I'm going to do something, I'm going to put something out there, I'm going to make a post, and then something's going to happen. Well,
Right.
that's an employee mindset that's based on transaction. It's based on linear, right? The basis of the employee relationship in a job setting is I give you 8 hours, you give me money,
Mhm.
or I
Mhm.
complete this project and you give me something. There's a transaction. I give you, you give me. And that doesn't live in the entrepreneurial game, but when people think it does, then they just simply can't win. So part of my passion is to help creatives become entrepreneurial, right? I was just telling a story today, actually, about the golden Buddha in Thailand. Have you heard that story?
I have not.
So about 50 years ago or so, they were cleaning out this monastery. They were going to move the location of a monastery, and they came across this giant Buddha that was made of clay, and it had like all kinds of glass pieces in it. And it was just like this. It was a Buddha, but it looked like it was just formed out of trash almost, right? And when they went to move it, one of the workers noticed that there was light coming from the inside, which of course clay is not going to emanate light. And so he chipped away at it and found that it was gold. They ended up chipping the whole thing away. It was almost 10 feet of solid gold that was covered up in clay. So they're trying to figure out what happened. And several centuries ago, what they realized is that there was this society of monks, and they heard that an army was going to come through. I think it was the Burmese army was going to come through, and they knew they didn't have a chance. They knew they were all going to get slaughtered, but they didn't want them to take their golden Buddha. And so before the army came in, they covered the Buddha with all kinds of this clay and glass and all kinds of stuff to make the army not value it. So hopefully they could retain protect their golden Buddha. And that's exactly what happened. The army came in, decimated everybody, killed everybody, but left this Buddha. They're not going to trek, go through their travels with this big old Buddha. The thing I love about that story is when we go through life, we put all of these layers of clay protection on us because we don't want to get hurt. We don't want people to find out who we are. But what that does is it suppresses the golden Buddha inside that we all have. We all have this creative, poetic, sacred value inside. We just got a bunch of clay on top of it. So I think this process of what we're talking about is really about melting the clay so that the golden Buddha can shine. But we're not programmed as the golden Buddha. We are programmed primarily as the layers of clay. And that's where the employee mindset lives. So as you've been talking about, the poetry and poets monetizing, first of all, we got to unleash that golden Buddha, but then the entrepreneurial Buddha operates differently and has a different value and has different places that will value it than the clay employee Buddha does. And I think so many people have this internal conflict between their value inside, the poetic creativity inside, that sacredness inside, whether it comes out as a poem or it comes out as any other form of creativity. But once that is unlocked, once we even tap into that, we need to reprogram. We need to recondition, because those layers of clay are meant for one thing: protection. Creativity is not meant to protect. Creativity is meant to expand, to love, to be flexible, to flow. Like, it's an exact opposition of each other. So what I hear you doing, which I think is so beautiful, is unlocking these creative Buddhas, right? Like, let's tap into the golden Buddha and unlock it so that it can heal, it can serve, it can create, it can live, it can design. There's so much trapped potential inside there, which is why I love the poetry as a service. There's so much trapped, valuable potential service inside there that the clay is suppressing.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that lands as hard as, with you as it does with me, man. I think it's the journey
heavy
that we're on.
It's so heavy, man. I think the closest to God that you can ever get, beyond dying, is to become a creator.
Yes, I agree.
Like,
it's sacred.
If you believe that God created you and everything around you, then and you're trying to be like God, and the Christian faith is to be Christ-like, then you need to become a creator.
Poet Life University welcomes you to the world of creation, thoughts, expertise and professionalism by offering technical knowledge, practical support, creative encouragement, and whatever it takes for you to create the poetry career that you've always desired, but never knew was possible. And the best part is we have professional poets from around the world as professors to teach you everything they've learned throughout their poetry careers. We are currently offering several 8-week live courses that will help you gain a deep understanding of poetry, become confident in your work as a poet and writer, learn how to start your own business with the help of an expert, enjoy the freedom that comes from being able to pursue what you love on your terms. Are you ready to take your poetry to the next level? Learn with others by doing for the future from the comfort of your home. Get in touch with us at www.poetlifeuniversity.com and enroll today.
Because if you're not, you're simply going to be a consumer and simply just take in.
Yeah.
That's what a consumer does. They consume. But what are you producing? You have to become the other word is producer.
Yes.
What are you producing?
Yeah, that's a really powerful distinction there, putting those two together. As we consume, all we're doing is taking in. Right. And the cool thing I think that we need to understand is that creativity is already in us. It's not something that we need to learn as much as it's something we need to allow
And reveal.
because we are creators, you know, and that analogy, we all have a golden Buddha, whether you believe it or not, doesn't change the fact that it exists. So the choice, it's like what you were saying, a choice to monetize your poetry or not, doesn't change the fact that it's monetizable, right? Your poetry is financially viable if you choose. Now you can choose not to, but it doesn't change the fact that it is viable. Every single one of us has a sacred creator inside of us. Just because we don't know it doesn't change that it's not there. And just because we haven't learned how to let it out or how to really be free inside of it, because that's a scary proposition for a lot of people, right? That when our Buddha has lived for years or decades in the protection of the clay, when we take that clay off, it's actually extremely uncomfortable for most of us. You know, that sun is really bright when you take the shade off. And we have to remember that this is who we're meant to be. This is what's meant to shine in order to counter the immediate discomfort of letting our poetry out into the oxygen. Because our conditioning will tell us that's not safe. People are not going to like it. I can't make money off of it. Nobody wants to hear about it. We have all these conditions that actually suppress our sacred creativity. And that journey is not an easy one. It's not the flip of a switch, but it's possible. And I love how you put it. It's a choice. I think everybody can. Most people will choose not to.
Yeah. Because it takes work.
Bingo.
The average person doesn't want to exert more work after their 9-to-5 work.
Yep.
You know, and to hear that there is no money in poetry, it makes no sense.
Right.
Watch. There's money in trash.
Yeah.
Just think about it. There's a trash industry.
Yeah.
There's an industry for trash.
Right.
And so the whole time you were talking, I was just like, there's money in everything. You can tell me there's no money in something that can help someone heal, find a coping mechanism, a place of peace, self-expression. There's no money in that.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Does that make sense at all?
Right.
So you're just going to allow yourself to be brainwashed for
Mm.
years. I'm 39, and for 30 years, I've been trying to figure out and learn and research. Okay, I keep hearing there's no money in poetry. I was younger, I was super young, and a millionaire told me when he asked me what I wanted to be, you know, that whole "what you want to be when you grow up"
Right.
question,
Yeah.
you know, and I said I want to be a poet. I want to, you know, and he said there's no money in poetry.
He said that. Wow.
And I put my pen down. I'm
Wow.
an ambitious person. Like, you know, I all right, where's the money at? All right, you know, the money's in IT. That's what
Mm.
my career is in, IT.
Yeah.
I mean, he wasn't lying about that. There's
Right.
money's in IT, but and it's not that he was lying about there not being. He just doesn't know. He didn't
He
know
doesn't know. Yeah. He was telling you his truth, but that's not the truth.
his truth in ignorance,
Yes. Man.
and
And
so that it's contagious.
yes.
I put my pen down for years, but
Man.
when it's purpose, you can't run from. You can. It's not
Yeah.
wise, you know, because it's going to keep showing its face
Yeah.
because that's what you were created to do.
It's in you.
That I think people we say words so much that they have no meaning.
Yep. They get diluted.
Purpose is just a word. Like if you really don't stop and think what it means,
Yeah.
you know, because we all everyone's it's a trend. It's trendy
Yeah.
to pursue your purpose, or you know, um, but if you really think about what it means, like what is the purpose of this remote? Like, what if the remote didn't live up for its purpose? Like, TVs
Right.
wouldn't cut on, or we would have to get up off the couch and push the button.
Yeah.
So
That's
you
true.
you literally were created. This was created to turn the TV on, turn the volume up, down, the settings,
Yeah.
and there are too many people. There are too many people that are choosing to sit on
Yeah.
their purpose, or not even find it, or
Yeah.
because you don't have to find it, like you said, it's in you.
Yeah. You just got to connect to it. It's got to be revealed. And I think in the conversation about creative purpose, it can only be revealed through the activity. You can only chip away those layers of clay or melt them off by doing things,
Mm,
getting out there, whether it's writing poetry or starting a business adventure or whatever the motion is, fueled by
mhm,
passion.
mhm, mhm.
Our purpose is going to be revealed. I think we live such a safe life. We're afraid of making mistakes. So
Yeah.
somebody telling you what this person told you, there's a piece of you that's like, I don't want to make a mistake then. And this person has
Mm,
authority. Honestly, I've got a book right here that's on the father-daughter relationship, and it hasn't been published yet. And I know that one of the reasons it hasn't been published yet is because years ago, I took somebody's word, very credible person, said some same version of, you can't make money with parenting books. Parenting books don't sell, is what I was told. And even though I didn't consciously believe that, and I knew intellectually there's value there, I know, and this was 10 years ago at least, I know that is an element as to why that book still isn't published. And it's coming out in a few months, so it's in motion. But I
mhm.
can recognize the power of somebody telling you that won't work, and then us not trusting ourselves or hearing, an input from somewhere else and going into what's already there. Like that's the tragedy of this, man. Like I'm genuinely sad in even talking about this, because so many people suppress the, not just the value that we can experience, but that S stands for service, which means other people are missing your service. Other people are missing out on the value that we have to give if we're suppressing it. So it's a lose-lose all the way around, that this societal programming based on safety, based on being an employee, based on not really valuing and understanding creativity has on us. And man, if we could just unlock our own creativity, obviously I know this is your passion. You've been doing a lot toward it. If we could unlock our creativity just as a species, you know, what that would do in our relationships, what it would do with our self-esteem, what it would do in our families, what it would do in our societies. I mean, truly, it's like you said, it makes no sense, because this thing is arguably the most valuable thing. And yet some of us have been programmed that it's not worth any money.
Yeah.
It's tragic,
Yeah.
man.
It just can do so many things. It serves as a tool, and then as a tool, it serves as different types of tools.
Yeah.
It's a tool for inspiration. It's a tool for education.
Mm-hmm.
It's a resource. Like, it's words. So how you
It's the sacredness inside of it. You know, I loved what you were saying earlier about how your poem is a TED Talk, and it's a workshop, and it's a therapy session. And, you know, I've only been writing poetry for about 3 years, maybe 4 tops. The first thing that I did that was poetic was, and it wasn't really poetry, but creative in this sense, at least, it was to do a one-man play. I'd always wanted to do one. At the end of 2018, I finally decided to write it, and then I performed it, and that unlocked all this creativity inside of me. And since then, I've been writing poems, you know, and I've done a couple TED Talks with spoken word poems. And what you just triggered in me is, for me, from my experience, is that every time I share something that's meaningful to me, right afterwards, I hear this voice that says, you shouldn't have done that. Like, nobody cares. You know, nobody cares about that thing that you care so much about. Nobody cares. And for 3.5 years, I've not figured out a way to make that voice go away. But I've just learned to do it anyway. And what you just triggered in me is, pretty much every time I've shared anything that I've then judged that I shouldn't have, somebody tells me it just gave them life. Somebody says, I've listened to that 100 times, or can you please send it to me? Or that thing really landed. So what's so fascinating to me is the very thing that I still judge as not valuable is the thing that gives somebody life. And I think it's simply because it came from my life. You know, it came from this creative entity. And I believe, as you said, we're all creators and we're all connected in that creative energy. So if I touch my golden Buddha and I let it speak, it'll speak to yours, because it's really the same language. Now, my details might not be the same as yours. In fact, very rarely will they. But the connection at a sacred level that goes under our shared details is more powerful anyway. And that's what we have the ability to do if we have the permission and the bravery to share that sacred creation. It will change and or potentially save somebody's life, regardless of how we perceive it. If it came from our creative, sacred energy, somebody needs it. And
Mhm.
so I think a lot of this game is just getting out of our way, because we're the ones that put the clay on, and we're the ones that don't want to take the clay off. And if we would just
Mhm.
get out of the way and let the sacred voice speak to the
Mhm.
people that needs to hear it, it's unfathomable
Mhm.
the kind of change we can create and the kind of meaning that we can fill, or that we can feel rather, and
Yeah.
the depth of the purpose that we can then fulfill. It's
Let me
profound.
let me share with you how powerful an original poem can be and is. If someone is heavily burdened, right, and have a lot on their heart, a lot on their mind, and and they just can't get past all of what they've been through,
Yeah.
what a poem can do and has done for people, one, it allows you to express yourself. and
Right.
and what does that mean? That means all of what you've held and hoarded is able to release at the basis of it,
Yep.
at the surface, right? At the very least you can release. But writing a poem, it removes the perceived judgment of the person that you're talking to, or feel like you
Mm.
have to talk to, like a therapist or whatever, right? And that's why people don't go to therapy,
Right.
because they don't feel like that person can relate to what you've been through, all of
Mm.
that, right? But if you're writing, the paper doesn't judge you.
Right.
That means you can just
Mm.
freely flow. And flow means to allow it to flow out of you.
Yeah.
But and that's just writing, just
Right.
writing. But if you write a poem, you then have to analyze what you've been through, so
Yeah.
you can creatively say it or write it in a way that's poetic. So so all of this is you have to use heart, brain, all of these mechanisms that you have within you
Yep.
to even create a poem.
Yep.
So all of that stuff that's buried inside has to be sifted through
Yeah.
to even produce a poem.
Mm.
To think of words to rhyme with or not. Do I want to rhyme with suicide?
Mhm.
And now you're thinking about what made you think about suicide.
Right. Yeah, the process itself
The
is where
process
so
in
much of the
itself.
value is. Yeah.
And then watch. Now it's on paper.
Yeah.
Now it's on paper. And even if you don't feel confident reading it, you can and talking about it, you can pass that paper to that person and let them
Bingo.
read it.
Yeah.
And now they understand what you went through.
Mm.
And now you feel more confident to talk about what you went through.
Yeah. Because the understanding, I think, comes from the connection at that creative depth. And I think while our sacred creations, however they come out, are helpful and therapeutic for us, they're not for us. To take what you just said and just plus it a moment, somebody else needs those words, and they can't access them in your head.
Mm-hmm. It was for you first.
Right.
It was for you first
Right.
to help you release and break all that up.
Yep.
But it's free flowing. It has to keep flowing.
Bingo.
It's a
Yeah.
flow. So it has to go through you. It has to pass through you.
Yeah.
And poetry is a gift,
Yeah.
but the gift wasn't solely for you.
Mm,
You then have to repackage it
exactly. The, the
and
the
give it
the
to
lessons
somebody
we
else.
learn are not ours to keep. They're ours to teach. And poetry is a beautiful package to wrap those lessons in.
Man, if people just could see what I see, man,
Yeah.
and that's what this is for, and I haven't really studied YouTube like I need to, and I will this year,
Yeah.
to learn how to maximize my reach. I pretty much just upload and
Right.
follow the simple process, and
Yeah.
and I know I need to get with a YouTube
Yeah.
coach. I'm going to invest in a coach to teach me how I can maximize, because this information is valuable and people are looking for it. As a matter of fact, our videos don't even come up when you search how do you make money in poetry,
Okay.
because I haven't done the due diligence yet.
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah.
doing the work.
Yeah.
I'm just doing the work. I
Mm-hmm.
have a lot on my plate, and as I'm sifting through all of the work I have to do and delegating, I'm now getting to, and we've been doing this 2-3 years, and so now I'm in the process of learning how to maximize YouTube
Yeah.
and make sure it gets to the people it needs to get to. And I'm really excited about that because this information is not being talked about.
Yeah. I've never heard it. I've never seen it. I think it's very unique, because, like we talked about, the programming is like, why would anybody ask how to make money with poetry if the predominant programming is you can't make money with poetry,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So like we're shut down before we even ask that question. So
Mhm.
you're really expanding people's capacity
Mhm.
to dream and
Yeah.
to build and to just give voice to this sacred creation. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with making money off of it. There's nothing wrong with earning an income, providing a valuable service, even
Period.
if that valuable service started, as you said, as something for you. Yeah, we can make the case, not that this is, I don't want this to land with shame or anything, but I mean, we could actually say if you have a valuable service and you're not sharing it with people, then, that's
It's
somewhat selfish.
selfish.
Right. And if it's an intentional choice, like we talked about, that's cool. You can make that choice, but it's still a choice. And it is massively valuable to help somebody figure something out in their life through your shared experience. I mean, you can't put a price tag on that. And I know you know this. There are literally millions of people over the years that have not killed themselves because they read a poem or
Right.
because they heard a song and it
Mhm.
touched them and it changed the
Mhm.
way they thought. And because of that, their entire life plan altered. They changed lanes and it
Mhm.
would have gone down a dark path. And whether they would have actually committed suicide or not, I don't know. But like, parents stop beating their kids and relationships reconnect. Like there's so much almost unfathomable change that can happen just because somebody's heart was touched.
Mhm.
And that could be the moment. And so many people could find that moment through your poetry, yours, mine, anybody listening to this or watching this. There's a sacred creation, and if we have the bravery to touch it, what it can do for us is profound, but what it can do to serve other people is
Man.
monumental.
We at The Poet Life are excited to invite you to be a part of something that we've all been longing for. For far too long, each and every one of us have been searching for a way to get connected with like-minded people, specifically poets who have the desire to make poetry their career. We've all heard more than once from more than one person that there is no money in poetry. This couldn't be further from the truth. Your poetry is invaluable. Allow us to show you how successful you can be with your poetry. Learn how you can go from being an individual poet to launching a business that offers poetry as a service. Join us as we build the poetry industry together. The Poetry Business Network that is made of poets from all over the world who are looking to start their career in the poetry industry or simply do more with their poetry. We will meet twice a week on a Zoom call every Tuesday and Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You will have the opportunity to meet and network with poets from all walks of life. You will also have the privilege of meeting and learning from the best professional poets in the world. Many of them have been guests on the Poet Life podcast. We have also incorporated a book club where we read personal development books to help us change our mindset. In order for us to realize our greatness as professional poets, we must renew our minds. So, for just $1, you can check out the Poetry Business Network to see if you like it. We are confident that you will. If you choose to become a member after the first week, membership will be $79 a month. But if for whatever reason you don't, you can cancel at any time. There is no obligation. So, make the investment of just $1 and change the way you see and pursue poetry. We hope you become a part of the Poetry Business Network. Together, we can build the poetry industry.
Yeah. My best, my close friend, when I was younger, about 10 years ago, 10 years, almost, 10 years, 2012, Justin Islar passed of cancer. He was diagnosed at 18
Wow.
and a freshman year in college at Coppin State University. You imagine freshman year.
I can't even
And
begin.
come on, like you're on a new life journey, excited, and then you get hit with that news. Your leg stiffens, and you're like, "Oh, what's happening?"
Man.
And so it was osteosarcoma, and he fought strong, hard for 7 years. And throughout that journey, he wrote poems that chronicled his journey with cancer.
Wow.
And he didn't start writing poetry until after he was diagnosed with cancer.
Wow.
He was so good. I thought he'd been writing poetry for
Right.
years. And when he passed, we started the nonprofit Fighting Cancer with Poetry. We
Oh,
still
wow.
operate in, and we even published his work, and it's called The Fight of My Life.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's so powerful, man. It's so powerful. It's crazy. But I say that to say, we started the nonprofit because we were like, wait, he started writing poetry after he was diagnosed with
After,
cancer.
yeah.
So that means he found solace, he found peace in poetry. He found it to be a coping mechanism while
Yeah.
he was going through the hardest thing ever as he was fighting for his life. But watch this. It's still here.
Yeah. Oh.
Even though he isn't, his poetry is still here. And it is
Wow.
still inspiring and saving other people's lives.
Man.
So when you write a poem, you create a legacy.
Yeah.
You don't just write a poem and it's a poem, it's cute. it lives forever.
Ever.
When you write a book, the book that you wrote, books last forever. That's why I
Yep.
have my daughters writing books. My 7-year-old published a book at 6
That's amazing.
because I realized, like, okay, do I have to wait until I'm old to help them create a legacy and help them, inspire people? That whole what is it? Old age old question.
Yeah.
Um, what do you want to be or do when you grow up? Why do you have to wait till you grow up?
Right.
See, that's the employee mindset,
Yeah.
because you can't become employee
That's
till
deep,
you
man. Till you're grown. Yeah.
So what do you want to be when you grow up? You can't be an employee at 6.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
where
There's
that
a
came
depth.
from.
Yeah. There's a real depth to just that question.
And
I've
then they
never thought
list
about
off.
that.
Then they list
Right.
off the employee jobs. You want to be a doctor, you
Right.
want to be an engineer, you want to be a lawyer, you want to be,
And it's all based on doing something, right?
and
It's
none of
doing
them have they
something.
said any of the creator positions.
Yeah.
They didn't say, do you want to create? Do you want to create? Do you want to create? That's what I tell my kids.
Yeah.
What do you want to create? I'm not asking you want to be what you want to be when you grow up.
Yeah.
What do you want to create now?
Man, that's so good. What do you want to be when you grow up? Yeah, and that assumes that you're not something now. What if we asked our kids, who are you now, rather than what do you want to be later? When you can provide some value in exchange for some skill that you have. That's what you're doing with your babies, is really giving them the value now.
Your
That's
kids are
so,
blank canvases.
yeah.
Your kids are blank canvases. I what I do is I look past terminology.
Yeah.
You know the compound word, or maybe 2 words, home training.
Mm-hmm.
We say it so much, it's just a word, right?
Right.
But I keep saying to my kids, listen, what you're doing here, you're living here, this is called home training.
Yeah.
That means you're being trained here
Yeah.
to go out into the world and be productive. So you're going to learn how to be productive here. You're going to
Yeah.
what does that mean? You're going to learn how to produce
Mm.
here. Not be laborers, not be consumers. You're going to learn how to create here.
Yeah. One of the things that is so important about what you're saying and what you're doing with your children is that we as adults fear what's unfamiliar to us. So we value what's familiar and we're afraid of what's unfamiliar.
Mhm, mhm.
And it's got such a powerful grip on us. And it's frequently called, the fear of the unknown, but it's deeper than that. It's the fear of the unfamiliar.
Mm.
But if you break that down, the root word of familiar is family. We value family so much. So anything that feels like we are being pulled away from our family, we're going to resist at a deep, deep level. So what you're giving your children is a familial experience. And that's what they'll carry around. That's
That's
deep,
crazy.
man.
That's
Right?
crazy. I did not know the base word for familiar is family.
Right? And
I
that's one
know
of our
I knew
core.
familial,
Right.
but I didn't know familiar. Whoa,
right?
that's
And
heavy.
one of our core desires as a human is to be in family.
Mm.
So
And if it's
anything that
not,
feels like it threatens that is a danger. So you're making creativity family.
familial. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay, yeah, you just blew my mind right there, man. And I'm sure somebody's mouth is to the floor right now, watching and listening. This is what's not talked about,
Yeah.
and that's why things are taboo.
Bingo.
Why why is money taboo? Why is sex taboo?
Mm-hmm. It's not talked
That
about in the
you're
family.
that's dangerous.
That's absolutely.
That's
It's
dangerous.
unfamiliar.
So
Mm-hmm.
that means the young person has to go out into the world
Yeah.
where it's unfamiliar to figure it
Yeah.
out
Bingo.
and go bump their head and because their family won't talk about it.
And figure it out from entities or people that in some way are trying to use them or use their intention, or at the very least doesn't have their purest desires at heart.
Because they know they won't learn it at home.
Mm,
So,
man.
and they know somebody has to teach them.
Yeah.
And so there's opportunity for those entities to teach them whatever they want to teach them.
Yeah. I think the easiest thing to manipulate is ignorance. And that's what you're speaking to. If we didn't learn something, we're ignorant about it, somebody else is going to take advantage of that.
Yeah, man, this is good. This is
And
good,
all of
man.
this is the essence of creativity. It really, truly is.
You said you did a TED talk recently. Tell me about that.
Yeah, this is one of those creations that is deeply, deeply meaningful to me and scary when I actually did it. It's my journey with racism. You mentioned Let's Grow. That was a poetic movie, all done in spoken word, all about racism. A white man and a black man and a black woman, and the relationship between everything and ignorance and staying at the table and talking. And so I was inspired to, just a thought woke me up one night, and I was inspired to write a breakup letter to racism. So my TED talk is called Dear Racism, a breakup letter from a white man. And
Mm,
is my journey of understanding the grip that racism has always had on me. And I grew up in my life as a white kid growing up in a very culturally and racially diverse area. I wouldn't have identified at all as being racist. And I've been in arguments about me not being racist. And I've been aggressively
mm,
defending that I'm not racist. And I was in a conversation with a good friend of mine, Dominic. He's a black man. We grew up together, play baseball together, best of friends in our childhood. And I was actually yelling at him in an airport one day. We were on the phone. I was in the airport and I was yelling at him, and he was telling me about systemic racism. And I felt attacked, because he's basically saying, like, all white people are racist, and just talking about the system. And I felt the need to defend myself. And so I was screaming at him, honestly. And then he made a statement that completely changed my life. He said, I know you. We grew up together. You're not consciously racist, but you've been produced by a racist machine that benefits you more than it does me. And I stopped breathing in that moment. I mean, I stopped talking, I stopped screaming, but I stopped breathing in that moment because he challenged my thinking in a way that I couldn't defend against, nor did I need to defend against, because this is a machine that has produced all of us. And where I've been produced in that machine and where I sit in society is different than him as a Black man, but it gave me the opportunity to explore something without having to defend my character. And it was just incredibly profound. And it really started my journey toward the exploration of racism specifically and where I fit into it, you know, and white privilege and all the things that I, you know, like exploring the stuff that I never saw and a lot of stuff that's deeply, deeply uncomfortable for me. So all of that came out in this letter, and I actually wrote it on a piece of paper, you know, like dear racism, like I was breaking up with a, you know, a high school girlfriend or something, and it was incredibly tender for me. But hopefully, you know, something that can change minds and change hearts, just like Dominic's conversation with me changed the way I viewed the world and me inside of racism. And so it was a profound moment for me, and it was definitely a sacred creation. And I did a TED Talk with it. Now, so you add a TED Talk, right? In standing on that red circle with the TEDx sign behind you, you know, that just it elevates it to another level of spotlight. And it was really interesting that when I did the talk, immediately I had that voice that I spoke to earlier. Like, you shouldn't have done that. Nobody's going to care. It's not going to mean anything, you know, where it's like, you know, it's almost like a, sorry, I don't mean to take this in any kind of inappropriate way, but it's like a soulgasm, right? It's like, it's almost like an orgasm of the soul. And immediately I wanted to cover it back up. Right. It was like I was so raw and so open and so vulnerable. And then I looked around and went like, uh-oh, did I just do that? You know, did I just say that? All right, well, let me just cover this back up. Right. And as I said earlier, I've just learned that that's part of the process for me. And I'll tell on myself, haven't told too many people about it. I haven't posted it on all my social media. And so there's still this like sacred protection, fear of what'll happen, you know, and the concept itself, obviously racism is a very divisive topic, but part of my passion is to bring people into connective conversations so that we can see ourselves in each other, so that we can detach our identities and our egos from these taboo conversations. And, you know, racism fits one of those taboo subjects you just don't talk about. You know, you're not supposed to talk about it in school. You're not supposed to bring it up. And because of that, we don't know how to discuss racism specifically. So yeah, that was a few months ago that I did that on the TEDx day. It's something that I'm massively proud of and kind of scared to share.
I'm sure. Have you, has it been released on YouTube yet?
It is on YouTube. Yeah, it's on the TEDx channel. So I'm happy to share it with you, and you can feel free to share it, and I will share it for sure.
Yeah, I'll put it in the description of this video.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. After I go watch it.
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah. I'd love your reaction.
Yeah, for sure. Did you read the comments?
I did read some of the comments.
What do they look like?
Yeah, YouTube comments is almost like its own industry, you know?
Right.
Like, and it can get so vicious. For the most part, the comments are good. It doesn't have a ton of views at this point. I think it has less than 1,000 views. So I think there might be 7 or 8 comments or so. I think most of them are good. There are 2 of them that aren't so embracing. We'll put it that way.
Mm,
They're not vicious. They're not any kind of an attack, but they're dismissive. You know, like, oh, I didn't know this was. I forget what one of them was like. Oh, I didn't know
right.
this is what you're trying to say. Or another one, I think just said that's not real. Like racism doesn't exist or something like that.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
so yeah, there's a fear of the backlash for sure.
Mm, for sure. Yeah. No, it's that's a reality. That's a reality and an uncomfortable reality. And I think that's why it's so hard for other white people because of the reality of that.
White
they have
people
to
are
live,
terrified of talking about it
they
because
have to
we're
live in
terrified
that
of being
world.
attacked. Yeah.
They live in that world, and they know the ones who are saying even under their breaths at the dinner table and in their family. And how do you become the black sheep?
Right.
By standing up to it. Because the thing is that all families say and do inappropriate things.
Yeah.
Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, you know, they joke, whether it's a skinny person or a fat person or
Sure.
you right,
Yep.
uh, and it's like being that person that says you sit and say that about, you know, I get it, but it's necessary.
Yeah.
It's
I mean,
necessary. You can't just say I'm not racist. That's not enough anymore.
yeah, it's a really, really deep topic that is different for white people
Hmm.
and black people and people that don't identify with either of those 2 communities.
Hmm.
It's a very layered conversation. Of course, we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of years. We're talking about systems that were built in this country based on inequality. And the problem from the white perspective, one of them, is that you, as a black man representing the black community, are telling me to acknowledge something that I don't see is real.
Hmm.
So you're asking me to acknowledge essentially that I've been duped, that I
Mm.
am living a lie,
All my
that
life.
I am not living in reality. And you're associating me, and I'm just talking from the white defensive perspective, right? Which I sat inside of for a long time. So I'm speaking my own truth here just a few years back. You're asking me to acknowledge an evil that everybody agrees is evil. Being racist is bad in the white community too. It's just our definition of racist is
Mm.
somebody who's in the KKK and hates black people. So we think if we're not one of those 2 things, then we're not racist. And that's why we're so quick to tell you about our black friend. We're so quick to play the get out of racist card because our definition of racist is bad and we're trying to separate ourselves from that. And that's why we want to deny anything that could potentially link us to that, which is why when Dominic said, "You've been produced by a machine," it allowed me to remove my identity as a good person from the entity of racism.
Mm.
And then he and I could talk from a position where we're actually on the same team, right? We're both against that thing. It's us versus it rather than you versus me.
Wow.
But the white community is the one, in my opinion, that has created the defense mechanism. So it's the white community that needs to drop it, right? The white community defends against attacks that aren't happening, right?
Yeah.
I was actually in a conversation with a white man in coffee shop the other day, and we weren't even really talking about racism, but it ended up getting there a little bit, and he said something like, actually, I think I had told him the topic of my TEDx talk, and he immediately wanted to play the "I'm not racist" card. And one of the things that he said is, this isn't him trying to not be racist, but that led to this comment. He said something like, you know, they want us to apologize for being white. And I was like, no. Nobody has ever said that. Nobody has ever said you need to apologize for being white or you are guilty for what your ancestors did. Nobody has ever said that. They're just asking us to stop denying it. Like, people are asking us to stop defending and denying. They're actually not trying to ascribe guilt to us for things that we didn't do. But white guilt is real. That's why we put the defense mechanism out. That's why we defend ourselves before we're even attacked, which is actually confirmation of the guilt that lives inside of us. So the conversations that need to be had in the white community are different than the conversations need to be had in any of the communities. And there are conversations, I believe, that need to happen with all of us. And then there are conversations, I believe, that need to happen inside of our familial circumstances. There are conversations that only Black people can have with Black people. There are conversations that only white people can get to white people with. And then there are conversations that we can all have together. And I think the homogenous conversations, the white people and white people, Black people and Black people, Hispanic people and Hispanic people, and all the different, races and identities, those are part of the necessary process, right? It's not an either or. It's a part of the process. They're just different puzzle pieces. So hopefully this piece is speaking. I mean, I wrote it to white people because it's the white people that are going to agree with, that are going to resonate with my perspectives, right? And very similar to the movie that we did in the first part of this, I'm embodying my ignorance. I'm embodying my defensiveness of not being a racist. One of the first things I say is I'm not a racist. I got a lot of colored friends. And I know how inflammatory that word is, even, saying colored, but that's what I thought. And that's what they think. I can't be racist if Dominic was one of my best friends and he's a Black man. Right. So hopefully it's an opportunity to invite people into the conversation. Not that the poem is only, for white people, but it's a bold invitation into a tender conversation that we're typically afraid of. And my hope is that adding poetry on top of it will just give it a different energy, right? Because just the poetry itself, my hope is it's disarming to a degree. It gives it a different flavor that maybe people haven't heard before. And hopefully that will bring us into conversations that we haven't had before.
For sure. For sure. And it's so fitting that it's Black History Month.
Right.
And we have a schedule of episodes to release. However, I'm going to hijack that schedule and make this the next episode, which is next Thursday.
That's awesome.
And I'm talking to you, but everybody else is watching it right now, like it's right now. So
Right,
I
right.
think that's so funny. Um, but this was so timely, so on time, and informative, especially for me. That whole family familiar piece,
Mm,
that's still ringing in my head,
right.
because I literally, and that goes to show you, we say words so often
Yeah.
that we don't even think about the definition of them,
Yeah. They
you
get
know?
watered down. Yep.
Right, right. But that also speaks to, you know, us having knowledge of things and not knowing what they mean or knowing how to teach about
Right.
said things.
Knowledge without understanding. Yeah.
Wow.
And it also speaks to what you said earlier, that poetry by its very nature adds consciousness and
Mhm.
intentionality to words that we generally just throw out of our mouths
Mm.
without consciousness and intentionality.
Yeah.
And that process itself is profound.
Yeah. We can go we can go for another
I
hour,
know, right?
man. I love conversations like this, and I appreciate your perspective. I appreciate you coming on, and I look forward to staying in contact with you, man, because this is needed. Um, uh, we have to dismantle
Mm,
taboo subjects.
bingo. Yeah,
It's
thank you for the
it's
invite. It's
for
been
sure,
amazing to co-create with you
indeed,
over this time, and yeah, there's a lot more to do.
most definitely. Listen, everybody, I know you enjoyed this conversation because I have, and I'm a part of it. And so I can't wait to rewatch and remember and recollect, some of the moments in this episode. So if you want more information about what we have going on here at the Poet Life, go to thepoetlife.com and just peruse our site. But if you want to learn how to become a professional poet or just to do more with your poetry, you can also learn and be knowledgeable and get understanding at poetlifeuniversity.com.
Mm,
We have very knowledgeable and understanding professors that will take 8 weeks, once a week, hour and a half long on Zoom live uh, classes that will teach you the many things that you need to know to become professional poets or poets who just want to do more with their poetry. But also, we have a members only community called the Poetry Business Network.com. Check that out because on a weekly basis, not even a class. This is us gathering together to network and become family, become familiar with each other, poets around the world, on a Zoom call on a weekly basis, and we're just building the poetry industry while
mm.
we're uplifting the poetry community. And so I encourage you to just check out the things that we have going on. And Sean, tell me or tell the folks how they can reach you and what other things you have going on.
Yeah, everywhere online, I am Coach Sean Smith. Um, I do a lot of stuff on YouTube and Facebook, obviously, and what I'm really into right now is teaching what we've been talking about. My industry has been the life coaching industry, as we talked about in the beginning, but I've recognized how important creativity is inside of coaching, inside of living, really, but inside of the work that we do as leaders. And so I've started to teach creativity as well as entrepreneurship on top of that creativity. It's everything we've been talking about. So you and I are on real parallel paths. just slightly different campuses, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it truly is a mission that's so necessary. And when people can feel that connection with themselves and their creativity and their poetry, and they can win with it, and they can feel valuable inside of it, the world shifts a little bit. And every little drop, every little step that way has an exponential effect. So somebody will read a poem and then maybe inspire their poem, which would inspire their poem, which would inspire somebody else along the way. So I'm really passionate about teaching creators more so than I've ever been, because my life is, the creativity that's been pouring out of me over the last few years since I've kind of unlocked it is it's crazy. It's like almost impossible to put into words. So, and I'm, pretty easy to get a hold of. And if anybody wants to reach out in any way, send me a message and I'll get back to anybody and answer anything and support how I can.
Awesome. If you could leave something with the people to inspire, motivate, just to encourage them, what would that be?
Oh, let me sit with that for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
Can I read something? Just
Yes,
the last piece of a poem that I wrote not too long ago. And I'll just read the last stanza. I think it can fit on its own. And it's really, this idea came to me thinking about life, thinking about the promises I made to myself and how I live my life and what we're really here for. So here's the last piece of this. Your heart has the answers, so just ask it. Your dream's not a burden, so don't task it. Your pain holds your purpose, so don't flask it. Your face has your beauty, so don't mask it. Put all your purpose-filled eggs in your basket and save no room for potential in your casket.
Man, that was the perfect way to end this episode. I don't even know what the title of this episode is going to be, because we touched on so many powerful subject matters, taboo subject matters. Ooh, there we go. There it's coming.
There you go.
There
it is.
And the viewers
there
are like,
is.
they're looking at the title right now. Taboo.
Right. And then they see how it was born. Yeah.
But it's awesome for people to watch us create.
Yes.
That's how things, opening your mouth.
That's the poet life.
That's the poet life. Let me close mine before we keep on going. It's the poet life, everybody. We appreciate you all. Sean, Coach Sean Smith, I appreciate you. We'll reconnect. Everybody, y'all have a good weekend, whichever part of the week it is for you. But for us, it's a Friday, and we're going to have a great weekend. We're out.
That's right. Thank you, brother.
Find a way, find a way.